Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and good evening to anyone watching LDC's YouTube channel. Welcome to tonight's audit committee, and welcome to our guests as well. Welcome to councillors, welcome to officers and guests. So, first of all, the agenda, item 1, apologies for absence, please.
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Ho.
Thank you. Item number 2, please, is declarations of interest. Have we any declarations, please, from anyone? Nope. Good. And the next item on the agenda is item 3, which is minutes of the previous meeting dated the 21st of March 2024. I assume everyone has had chance to look at those minutes. Are there any questions or queries relating to those minutes at all? Okay, thank you. Moved by Councillor Woodward and seconded by Councillor Robertson. Thank you so much. Item number 4, accounting policies and estimation uncertainty. This is, I believe, Jane going through this report for us. Jane Irving, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. This report is something that we share with the committee every year around about April time, and it covers a number of areas. The first one is the accounting policies that we will adopt for the statement of accounts for 23-24. And these are based on SICF's standard list of accounting policies, but we actually tailor them to suit the council itself. So, for instance, if it's not applicable to Lichfield District Council, we won't include them as an accounting policy. So I'll give an example. Foreign currency accounting is not anything that we'd actually do because we don't deal with foreign currency transactions at all. For 23-24, I've added a new accounting policy to do with the joint venture with the partnership with Darwin Prospects, because that was actually signed before the end of March 2024. Although for 23-24, there will be no material transactions within the accounts. That will take place going forward in future years. This report also highlights the critical accounting judgments and any key sources of estimation uncertainty which are used when producing these accounts. Such things, examples are the assets and liabilities and the income and expenditure relating to the joint waste service with Tamworth Borough Council. Items such as business rates appeals, and also about capital assets and sundry bad debts potentially could be within this category. And finally, the pension fund liability that we have within the accounts. Also within this report, I've added a section on going concern, because obviously you're probably aware with all these Section 114 notices that have been issued throughout various local authorities within the country. It's become more of a growing issue for councils. So the Section 151 officer has to review whether we're in a position to carry on going on into the future without any major issues. And the conclusion from the review in the report, you'll see that, yeah, we are in such a position that we have no major issues on going concern. And then finally, within the report, you'll see that I've mentioned there have been 3 consultations in the last couple of months, which LDC has actually submitted comments on. The reports on these 3 consultations have been discussed with Councillor Ho, and any comments Kate has come up with has actually been added to the consultation that we've actually submitted. You'll see there's lots of technical areas within the various things I've mentioned within the report, and most of these will be dealt with at year end, and the external auditors' assets will be, combing through all accounts to make sure that all these material areas are actually covered within their audit, and to give assurance to the committee that the accounts are actually true and fair. And you'd be happy to know that they'll do a thorough review of everything. We can also say that we use some external specialists as well to assist us. One of them is the external valuer for capital assets, and these assumptions coming up from the external value will also be checked by the external auditors. And then finally, we have for the pension fund, we use an actuary to give us the figures for the accounts. But we also, well, I personally also do a reasonableness check to see that the figures are what we expected, bearing in mind what was forecast for the previous year, and then if certain items go up, other ones will go down. And we also rely on the Staffordshire County Council pension team and their pension fund auditors as well to give us assurance within this. But obviously, at the same time, assets will no doubt be checking with their own experts to make sure that the valuations are actually as accurate as possible as at the 31st of March. And thank you. Any questions are welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Tom, and then Sue.
Thank you, and it's just a general technical point, really. We're in a fairly large chamber here, and if this is being broadcast live, I know how important it is that people viewing from externally need to be able to hear what's being said. I think we need to make sure that we are quite close to the microphones. Otherwise, I'm pretty certain those people at home will be struggling to hear. So if I could just make a plea, please, that we keep the microphones fairly close to our mouths when we're speaking. Thank you.
I will do exactly that. Thank you. I'm grateful to Ms. Irving for taking us through the report, and it was around the pension liabilities. That sort of leapt out to me. And in paragraph 3.12 and 3.13, it refers to the pension risk related to the Freedom Leisure contract. And there's some explanation there, but then 3.13, it says the second judgment will no longer be required because as of April 2023, the leisure centre was transferred from Freedom Leisure into the council's wholly owned subsidiary. I'm not sure whether it felt to me like one was contradicting the other. And as we've got earmarked reserves around those pension liabilities, where does the balance of responsibility lie? If someone could sort of explain that to me. It refers to an earmarked reserve to manage the risk, and I wondered what sort of level of funding that earmarked reserve has. Thanks. There's one other point I want to make afterwards, if that's okay, Chair.
So I'll take that one. So when Freedom were responsible for running the leisure centres, they had a number of TUPE transferred staff that are part of the local government pension scheme. Their liability or the obligation to pay pension didn't sit at that point on the council's balance sheet. So the numbers we included were excluding that liability. But what we had to do was to make an assessment as to whether the council would need to step in to pay that liability in the event of Freedom getting into difficulty. So we would do a risk assessment each year using a percentage. That was fairly low, but we did increase it during the COVID period, and it dropped down again. So the aim of the earmark reserve that we set up when the Freedom arrangement started was to manage that risk, and it was at a value of 200,000 I've got in my head, which covered a percentage of the risk around that, mainly because Freedom were not at a situation where we would need to step in and pay the whole liability. What the process will be though moving forward is that because LWMTS is to all intents and purposes part of the council, those liabilities will be accounted for in the pension figures that the county council provide to us, so they'll form part of our pension figures on our balance sheet, and therefore they will be no different to the council's liabilities, and the risks will be no different to the council's liabilities. So we don't believe we need to have the earmark reserve specifically for this. we will manage that risk in the same way we do for the council in entirety. So it's general reserves.
Is that okay, Sue?
Yeah, I'm grateful for that explanation, and that's really helpful. The other suggestion I was going to make, Chair, if I might, is under the recommendations on 2.3. It refers to delegation to our section 151 officer to make further changes in the accounting policies. And I know Ms Irving just said that consultation drafts were shared with the Chair of Audit. Can I assume that when delegated authority is given, that will also be communicated with, and any changes in accounting policies will be communicated with the audit chair?
So, yes, if it's a fundamental one, if we were making fairly minor ones, but it's judgmental, but I don't mind, even if we wanted to change that to add in the chair of the committee in the delegation, that's fine. And we have quite a close correspondence. So anything of a technical nature in that form or that would affect the council as a council audit, we tend to run past the chair and the vice chair on most occasions.
Yeah, I think we've included that in previous committees. So if everyone's happy to add those words, can we recommend? Yeah, okay, thank you. Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for sounding like I've been gargling gravel all day. Thank you for this document, and thank you particularly for using track changes. My workload very much thanks you for that. From deep down from the bottom of the piece of coal where my heart should be. Just in relation to the new edition, the joint ventures policy. I'm just mindful that yesterday we had the CADA report come in about the botanist, and I'm fully aware that this has not been in this building very long, so I don't know is an acceptable answer. I know there was a calculation in there which said that the 3-year GVA, so the gross value added for that in terms of it being a regenerative investment, was about 1.7. I'm sure you're aware I have some concerns over the calculation there. Would that assessment coming back saying that it's not necessarily going to achieve that benefits cost ratio of 1-to-1 mean that it couldn't be considered under this policy and would be more appropriate elsewhere? Or would we be looking at the entire development overall with it being the entire joint venture?
So it will be the entire joint venture, and that would include the financial budget, not just for the particular discussion yesterday, but all the other tenants and the redevelopment, etc.
Any more questions? Paul, I think you had your hand up, and then Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Appendix A at the start with the list of policies according to the Code of Practice for local authorities, those highlighted in red being the ones we don't take and the reasons why, makes it very clear. Thank you very much. When you get into the accounting policy, do we take it as read those are word for word from the recommendations, or how do they differ? And if so, why do they differ from the recommendations of the Code of Practice? And I realise that may be a very long question. Is that something that we could go into separately?
So the majority of the wording will be lifted. However, I think there's an expectation that you would tailor them to your individual requirements. So I'm just flicking down, perhaps trying to find one that is a good example. I know there's one where we've got component accounting, for instance, somewhere in here. And we basically have set our own limits as to what we believe to be. So there's a policy for componentization, which is on page 27 of your pack. That sets limits and values that are relevant to this authority, for instance. So the £500,000, you may see that a lower or a higher figure if you looked at other councils in that situation. But there are other examples. So I think it mentions building control, for instance, for a shared service somewhere in it. Not all councils will operate the shared service. So it shouldn't be just a cut and paste out of the CITFA document. You should apply some judgment and some localisation to those policies.
Paul, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, okay. So I don't know whether any member on this committee has yet reviewed those differences and is happy with them, or whether we can set up an appropriate time that somebody on this committee can review those processes and be happy with them. It strikes me that unless we've at least paid some heed towards those differences, we don't necessarily know that we are following the code of practice.
I suppose the point I would make to members is that whilst we present them here and we'll give you the explanation, this is where the excellent auditor are your friends. They will do that assurance piece of work for you as part of the accounts. They have seen the report before we circulated and we've taken on board any comments, but they're the people that will give you the assurance that they are correct, they're applicable, and we've applied them within the statement of accounts.
Paul?
Thank you. And do you do a specific report on that? Is there a specific point at which you say we have reviewed this in comparison to recommended code, recommended statements, and these are the differences, and we agree that those are appropriate?
To make sure that the accounting policies are in line with the SIPFA guidance. We also then make sure that they are appropriate for the council, and where there are differences to the boilerplate wording, we will make sure that they're appropriate and have been applied correctly. You will find in our audit findings report, we will make specific comments around the appropriateness of the accounting policies, but I'll take it on board that that is something of a specific consideration for you, and we'll note that particularly in terms of the alignment with the SIPFA code, if that's something that you'd like to see.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think it's necessary to pull it out specifically. I'm happy if that is done. I'm brand new to this process, so I'm happy if that is done at some point, and at some point in the final documentation that we get, it is mentioned. Thank you.
Are members happy with the comments there from Paul and external auditors? Thank you. Tom?
Thank you, Chairman. Under 324, which is on page 13, the second line, it's very brief, and it perhaps covers myriad issues, if I can say that. Given potential legacy issues from COVID-19, I'm slightly intrigued as to know what those legacy issues might be, please, if that's possible to elaborate on that. Thank you.
I think Anthony's going to answer
Page
that.
13, under 324, undergoing concern.
So it's probably things like car parking income, which I don't think has returned 100% to the pre-COVID level, partly because, you know, you've got changes in society, like more people working from home, so less people coming in to use the car parks for workplace. It's things like that predominantly that we're talking about here.
Thank you very much. That answers the question. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any more questions on this particular agenda item? Now, that being said, we'll go to recommendations, please. Recommendation 2.1 is that the Audit Committee approves the Council's proposed accounting policies that will form part of the 2023-24 Statement of Accounts. Can I ask, please, does this committee approve the accounting policies? Thank you. Unanimous. Number 2, recommended that the committee approves the Council's approach to the critical accounting judgments, key sources of estimation of uncertainty and going concern. Is everybody happy with that? Yep, full show of hands. Thank you. And subject to the amendment that Anthony said on 2.3 to delegate to the Assistant Director, Finance and Commissioning, the ability to make further changes. And of course, the committee through the chair will get involved in that. Subject to that amendment. Thank you. And number 4, this is to note the 3 consultations from the Department of Levelling Up, Housing and Communities, National Audit Office and SIPFA to address the local audit backlog and embedded time reporting. So that is to note that point. Everybody happy with that? Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is agenda item 5, which will be presented by Andrew. And this is talking about Audit Committee Effectiveness Report, which, if people will remember, was carried forward from the previous meeting on the 21st of March. So, Andrew, please. Thank you, Andrew. If I may be the first person to ask a question, if I can. And then Tom and Sue. The question I have was built around training, so you have answered that. Thank you very much, because I think we've mentioned at the previous meeting, new members, things change. So to keep ourselves up to date, that training is very much welcome. So thank you for organising that. I guess my point is, if the score was 195 last time and now it's 172, what in reality is the significance of that? If it had been at 195, would have we been happy with that? 172, it obviously highlights that there is a need to improve in certain areas. But I was just thinking how this compares. I think you touched on this, how it compares with other authorities. 172, does that compare with other authorities?
Obviously, in relation to this is obviously a subjective evaluation of the committee, and obviously in relation to that scoring, then other organisations, for example, and other councils, for example, take differing views on how the scoring actually takes place. A number of organisations do it through myself doing the self-evaluation and presenting it to the committee, and other committees have actually asked for the individual self-assessment to be sent round each individual member. Those are then scored individually by each member and then brought together into one area to actually then determine the overall scores. I think in relation to the in relation to the scoring, I have tried to reflect the committee's responses in relation to areas for significant improvement. Obviously, in relation to the scoring, those areas of significant improvement score a 1. So again, you can then find some disparities in the scoring because it's so subjective in relation to that. From having a look at other authorities have scored at 185 and 186. But again, what I found with those is that they've already had independent members on those committees. So that area of scoring then goes up to a 5. So all of a sudden you get a swing from 1 to 5 quite dramatically on that. I think, as I say, where we're based, as I say, we are in that I suppose conundrum in relation to actually getting an independent member onto the committee or members onto the committee. And again, I think there's also the areas around that regular training and bringing that into fruition. And again, I think to help the committee is to have that as a structured training plan in relation to, for example, the role of the committee, also the role around the questioning of reports. And that's also been developed within the plan to go forward, and also areas around local government finance, etc. But also then being supported by the roles of internal audit and external audit, and also sort of areas around risk management and fraud, which I think once that's put into place for 24-25 will then strengthen the committee and move that score back up into the 190s, up to the close to the 200s. But again, there may be changes to the committee that we're unaware of currently going forward into 24-25 that again we may need to address when we do the self-assessment the next time. I hope that, Chair, answers your question in respect of that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your comprehensive answer. Anthony.
Can I just add a little bit something else to that? So there's a couple of other things I'll probably add to that. I think you always have to be cautious in terms of just comparing scores from different organisations, because people will score in different ways depending on the nature of the committee, the members on it, the nature of the person in some respects. So just as an example of this, I mean, sadly, I've sat in on quite a few audit committees, mainly during COVID, remotely, and you'll be amazed at the difference in quality of other audit committees that I've watched compared to this committee in its previous form and this form. I would say, I mean, on a range of 0 to 200, the score that we've come up with is probably around the correct ballpark in terms of that. I would say it's probably at the higher end of the spectrum in terms of the quality, the engagement you get from members. The other point I'd probably make, and I don't know whether Laura wants to step in on this, but I would expect that external audit would review the effectiveness of the audit committee as part of the value for money assessment. And if there were significant weaknesses because of the important role it plays in governance for the council, that it would be something that they would highlight as potentially at the worst end of the spectrum, some sort of statutory recommendation, but an area for improvement. So I would hope that would give you some sort of independent assurance from outside of the organisation.
Yeah, thank you for the extra comment there, Anthony. Tom, I think you had a question early on, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It's a fairly brief one. 15 on the list that we're looking at. Has an evaluation of knowledge, skills and training needs of the chair and committee members been carried out within the last 2 years? It probably has. The only slight problem with that is that I think 5 of us on this committee this evening are all new to this, including you, Chairman, with no disrespect whatsoever intended. So the majority of us on this committee as it sits this evening are all newcomers. And so the committee may well have been evaluated for knowledge, skills and training needs within the last 2 years, but it certainly doesn't apply to us 5. So I would suggest that that needs to be addressed fairly soon to bring it up to date, if that's possible, please. as I say, I'm not really wishing to criticise, but I'm making an observation that that is something which at the moment is slightly outdated. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I would have thought that the training plan that is now being put together will take care of a lot of those gaps in our knowledge and experience. Sorry, Sue, and then you, Paul.
Thanks, Chair. As an even newer member than Councillor Marshall, I'm grateful for the changes that have been made, and I think there is a much more realistic assessment of where we are as an audit committee. The only one I would query is number 5. Do all those charged with governance and in leadership roles have a good understanding of the role and purpose of the committee? I'm assuming that means those charged with governance and in leadership roles across the whole council. And if so, I'm not entirely, that would therefore include every single member, because we've all got those sort of individual and also corporate responsibilities. And I'm not entirely sure that every member of this council understands the role and purpose of the committee. So that's the one I would quibble with. And these are quibbles. It's reassuring to hear from Anthony that as far as the average committee performance is concerned, we're doing pretty well. But, you know, I think we're better to be realistic and aim for further improvements than to, somewhere in the report it refers to complacency. We don't want to be complacent about where we are. Just that number 5, and I don't know what other members feel about that. Thanks, Chair.
Sue, was that a question round number 5, or was that a statement of your opinion, do you think?
Chair, it was a question for other members as much as anything else, really, because I'm not entirely comfortable that every councillor on this authority understand the role and purpose of the audit committee.
Thank you for that
I
clarity.
don't know whether others are more reassured than I am.
Thank you. Tom, do you want to add to that point?
I simply want to endorse what Councillor Woodward has just said. And I think that is a very appropriate statement, because I think it was a statement, wasn't it, Councillor Woodward? Yeah. And I think it sums up the situation extremely well. And it's something which probably does demand a little bit of further investigation, Chairman. Thank you.
On this side of the room, please.
I suppose one of the things I would say is that the chair presents it's on the agenda. So there's an annual report of the audit committee that goes to full council that the chair of the committee signs off. So the aim of that report is to demonstrate to the wider council the role and what the audit committee's value is to the organisation. Now, and then that gets considered at full council. So I'd hope that members are aware of the committee and its importance purely from that report that's provided to the full council. Plus, we also take things like the Excellent Auditor's annual report, which would cover the role of the committee, the accounts, etc., etc. So, I do think we do take it as much information as necessary to highlight to the wider council the value of the committee.
Can I just respond to that?
Okay, so please.
And
then Paul.
My recollection is when those sorts of reports come to full council, they get minimal discussion or debate. And it isn't about whether the audit committee reports to council. You know, there you are, there's the external auditors report, there's the annual governance statement and so on. It actually says, do they have a good understanding? I'm not sure how you test that. You can give people reports, but you can't, you know, make them understand it. But it might be useful just to test the water at some point across the whole council. Do you understand the nature and role of the audit committee? I'm not trying to downgrade us as an audit committee. It probably only needs a minor or a moderate improvement, but you know, I don't know whether I'm not a lone voice, because Councillor Marshall's just said that's a good idea. But you know, is there any way we can make sure that there is that ownership of how important the audit committee is across the whole council?
Okay. Paul, did you have something to say? Dave's got his hand up as well on this topic.
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points in the
On item 5, please.
Oh, no, sorry.
Dave, you are, yes, so please can you carry on?
Thank you, Chair. I have actually got some other points I'd like to make, but I would like to come in on this because I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Woodward. I think it would be a good thing to check in with actually the 47 of us, particularly after a set of local elections where there was so much change. I think that's very valuable. I actually think in terms of the assessment that's here, though, I'm actually comfortable with no further improvement. Because this is about decision-making places, and actually no individual councillor is a decision maker. Full council is. And actually, I think that within our full council, we've got a sufficient spread of people who are aware of this. We do have the cabinet model operating, and I've certainly never come across a situation where the cabinet aren't aware of this, so therefore can lead particularly one of the groups. The principal opposition leader is a member of this committee. So I think in terms of full council making that decision, or any decision that is a council decision, I think we've got appropriate safeguards in place at current time within this council. Notwithstanding that, I do think it's very worthwhile actually ensuring that we maintain that and do that work to reach out to all councillors.
Thank you. This is item 5. Are we happy now that we've debated item 5 long enough? Paul, sorry, John, Paul had his hand up. Presumably this is another item.
A couple of separate points. In paragraph 3.3 on the background, second bullet point, it mentioned the lack of private meetings between the committee and internal audit. It mentions a private meeting scheduled prior to the audit committee today. Was that a meeting with the chair and vice chair? Was that a meeting I missed? I'm not sure whether that's something that happened, and because I checking back on the minutes, I couldn't see it in the minutes.
Just for clarity, I think it was intended originally to be prior, but it is now after this meeting in private session. John, you had a point, please.
In the minute. Members.
Okay, John. Right. John and Dave, thanks very much on this point. Did you want to add something to it before we go over to Andrew for an answer, Dave? Okay, so Andrew, I think we've talked about this previously, so would you like to pick up on this, please?
Yes, there was, prior to the meeting, I did point out to the chair that the next item in relation to the chair's annual report did hold that disparity in relation to the requirements for an independent member, and I was going to bring to basically, as part of that, a change to the wording on the chair's annual report to reflect the committee's requirement for independent members.
Thank you, Andrew. Is that okay, John? It's a bit of clarity will be put in the chair's annual report on that particular point. Thank you. Dave.
Thank you, Chair. First and foremost, thank you for bringing this back. I know it was I spotted it rather late in the day last time, and it caused a bit of blood pressure in the room. So, thank you for the decision that we all made to delay this, so we could discuss it properly. I think we've had a couple of comments already of the fact that the scores dropped by 20 odd points, and I really don't think I'm not enormously concerned about. Obviously, it's a drop. You don't want to see a drop, but I think the 195 last year will be the outlier. I think I don't imagine there are many authorities around the place that are scoring much higher than that because of the nature of the previous committee. But actually, in reality, I'm less interested in using this as a summative assessment of saying, oh, well, we got over 180, so job done, everything is great. I think we need to use it as a formative exercise. A little bit the educationalist in me coming out there, and I see the other teacher on the committee is nodding at me. But actually, we should be using this as a way to say, well, where are we? How can we improve? How can we continue to drive this forwards? And on that point, if I may, I do want another point off you, sorry, Andrew, but I also want to give you 2 back. So hopefully I'll be in your good books. Line 13, which is one of the ones that's broken into several options. I should have picked this up last year, actually. Separation from executive. We don't have any members of the executive on this committee, nor would we. But I actually don't think that we have a constitutional bar to that happening. I think it's custom and practice that cabinet members don't sit on other committees, but I don't actually think there's anything unconstitutional should that seek to happen. So one of the things we may want to do is request to change the constitution saying that cabinet members may not sit on the audit committee. It's insertion of one line in the constitution, which I think would create that as a constitutional bar on that happening. And then, which I do think would be a good idea, but then that might, oh, sorry, it's going to take 2 points off you, sorry, because it's 5 down to 3. I do apologise. I'm going to leave you where we started. I mean, I'm happy to take views on that, but I think that's a possible thing that we can use this to try and drive some improvements and some changes. The next point, if you're happy for me to take all 3, Chair.
Yes, carry on.
Yeah. So the next one is on 14. Have all committee members been appointed or selected? And I think there, again, we don't have anything formal. We don't have anything written down there, but I think we can easily push that up to moderate. Because as I look around the committee, we've got a lot of local government experience in here. I think we've got one of, if not the most experienced member of one of the groups. We've got one of, if not the most experienced member of another one of the groups. We've got 2 returning councillors who were on this committee for 4 years previously. We've got 2 finance professionals, and these people have been selected by group leaders on the basis of their skills. So I think we're possibly marking ourselves down a little bit harshly on that one, because group leaders are clearly looking at it, whether we want to try and talk to them about formalising something, maybe. And then the final point, I think it kind of relates to that, is point 17, where again, I think we can push ourselves up to moderate there. We've got an enormous amount of local government experience on this committee. I'm looking particularly at councillors Woodward and Marshall, but I know Councillor Smith is a returning councillor and one of very few from your group. There's a lot of new members in your group. Myself and Councillor Howe have been here 5 years, in addition to those finance professionals that we got around here. So I think if I can take those 2 points off, I'm happy to give them you back on 14 and 17, if that's all right.
Members, having heard what Dave has said on 13, 14 and 17, is everyone in agreement with those slight amends? In that case, Andrew, is that okay to make those amends, or have you got other comment to make?
I'm just going to say, Mark's here as the monster officer, so the constitutional point that councillor officers raised, we can pick up. I mean, I do know there are other councils where members of the executive and the leader sit on the audit committee, and that has been raised, I believe, by the external auditors as a significant weakness. So it does happen.
Yeah, just to clarify, Chair, at the moment our constitution states that it's 9 councillors other than the chair and the leader of the council. That's the only bar as the constitution stands at the moment.
I would suggest that we take this offline and sort of look at this separately. I don't think it's up for us tonight to make any judgments on that at all. But you'll note that, Mark. Thank you. Okay, so Andrew, it looks like the score's going up a bit, but is that okay for you to make those amends?
Yes, I'll make those amendments, and then what I'll do is I'll recirculate the checklist around all members of the audit committee, so you've got copies of that.
As long as there's no further amends to the amends from the committee. Point taken. So, item 2 on here is that the committee approves the attached self-assessment questionnaire. And I think the way forward there is to do that subject to those amends. And 2.2, the committee considers and approves the proposed training plan, which was outlined in 3.5. Can I ask if everyone is happy to follow those recommendations subject to that change? Thank you. Item number 6 is the Chair of Audit Committee Annual Report. And on this one, it's Andrew again to present, please.
Thank you, Chair. On an annual basis, it is recommended by SITFA that the committee compiles an annual report, which is then circulated to all elected members of the council. This allows for the committee to promote its role and purpose, account for its performance, and evaluate whether the committee continues to meet its terms of reference. Appendix 1, outlined in my report, fulfills those requirements, and the report has been reviewed by the chair and comments made and attached as appropriate for the report tonight. I'm looking for endorsement of the attached together with the delegated authority to make minor changes with the chair of the committee to the attached, taking into account any committees made this evening by this committee. Again, I would like to point out the error which is outlined in the first bullet point in the corporate governance section on page 47 of your pack, and that's regarding the appointment of an independent member to the committee. And as I say, I will be making those changes and rewording that area to better reflect the views of the committee previously agreed. I'm more than happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Andrew. Please can I ask if there are any questions on this particular agenda item? Dave, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. I'm so sorry. The first one, just in the recommendation 2.2, it currently reads to delegate to audit manager in conjunction with agreement, which is yeah. Can we tidy that up, please? Yeah, I'm happy with the delegation, but I think just that's going to need to be tidied up. If we skip ahead to page 44 of the pack, which I haven't got a page number on it, sorry. The third paragraph in there, it says the remit of the committee was changed during 23-24 and it became solely an audit committee. Where required, a subcommittee will be drawn up to hear any member standards complaints. I don't think that's true anymore. So can we delete that second sentence? The fifth paragraph, I am a little concerned there. The internal audit program completion level has been high when compared to the agreed plan. I'm aware we've done 17 out of 19, but that actually drops below our KPIs. I'm also aware that that was possibly impacted by the fact that we had 2 delayed from last year pushed into this year, but then we've got 4 pushed from this year to next year. So I'm not sure if I'm entirely comfortable with the word high there. That's not to say that it's low or that we haven't necessarily got it. I'm just, if I was a member of the public picking this up, as I'm sure hundreds of thousands of people will be reading this. But yeah, I'm a little concerned about the use of the word high in there. I'm absolutely not evangelical about a replacement word, but I think that should be looked at. And then I think on page 45 of the pack, there's another place there where we've highlighted the independent members. So I know you're changing it there, but just to highlight, I think there's a second one there. And then my last one on this, if I may, page 47, it talks about SR6 being removed Can we state the name? I know it was the one about COVID. I can't remember what it exactly was, but again, for completeness, if somebody's going to pick this up cold and read it, as I'm sure people will get this far into it, just having the name of it, I think would be beneficial.
Thank you, Dave. Any further comments? I think the points that you've just mentioned there are very sensible. Andrew, are you happy to make those amendments?
Yes, more than happy to make the amendments.
Everybody happy with what Dave has said on those amendments? Thank you. Our task is number 2, that the proposed annual report of the Audit Committee, Appendix 1, be endorsed and that the Chair of the Audit Committee circulate the report to all councillors, subject to the amends that we've just said. Everybody happy with that? Thank you. And to delegate, number 2.2, to delegate to the Audit Manager in conjunction with agreement by the Chair of the Committee to allow any subsequent minor changes to complete the annual report prior to submission to all councillors.
Chair, shouldn't it be the Vice Chair on this occasion?
Audit Chair and Vice Chair. That's a halfway house.
The two of us. Thank you. Good point, Sue. Okay, we're all settled on item 6. Thank you. Item number 7 is the Internal Audit Annual and Quarterly Progress Report 2023 to 2024. Andrew, again, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to present my annual report on the work of internal audit for the financial year 2023-24. A summary and overview of the work completed by audit is contained within Appendix 1 of my report. I wish to highlight that during the year, and as outlined to the committee, there was an agreed audit plan of 19 reviews, and this total was revised to 17, and this is outlined in my table within the report. We have a target completion of the audit plan set at 90%, and as at 31st of March 2024, we had completed 59% of the planned work. However, to provide assurance to the committee, we currently have a number of audits that, as at the 31st of March, we had fully completed the field work, reports were drafted, and we were awaiting closing meetings with management. If these are taken into account, then the completion percentage rises to 77%. Due to the work completed, I can provide the committee with my audit opinion outlined in Appendix 1. The remaining KPIs, as outlined in the appendix, have been affected by the issues which affected the section during 2023-24. At the last audit committee in March 2024, provided an extensive overview of the position in relation to the outstanding audit recommendations, and the latest position, as at the 31st of March, is included for you, although there are non-material changes within my report. During 2023-24, we had 2 issues of note which were identified and brought to internal audit's attention, and these related to LWMTS management and control of DWP searchlight users and a whistleblowing allegation. A confidential briefing note has been provided to committee members in relation to the whistleblowing allegation. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Andrew. Has anyone any questions on agenda item 7, please? John, please.
High priority action.
No, a number of those are rolled through from earlier in relation to before 22-23 and 23-24. And as I outlined on the 21st of March in relation to that, I gave a assessment around those recommendations. Again, probably for clarity, I would suggest that any future quarterly reports would include the report that I included for the 21st of March, which would provide better clarity to the committee of where we are with those outstanding audit recommendations.
Thank you, Andrew. Is that okay, John? John, you happy with that? You have a question, Dave, or we're just going to cough?
Sometimes it can be both. I'm assuming okay to come in, Jeff.
Yeah.
Thank you. Page 59 of the document pack. It's part of number as part of the opinion. Consultancy and advice in relation to Lichfield bid. I didn't think Lichfield bid had existed for like 4 years or so. I mean, they spent the last of their money putting the flower pots in the parking bays in town during COVID. So, how has that come about?
That was effectively to actually close out and do the audit process for Lichfield bid to ensure that obviously the monies has been spent compliantly. So that's the reason why we did a little bit of consultancy and provided some recommendations around that area for management. But that was the reason why we covered it.
Yes, Dave, can you?
That's really good to hear, actually, because I remember having conversations with an officer who's now left the authority. I think in late 2020, I'd had some concerns from businesses in the city centre that were concerned about that closing down, and to have the assurance that basically to have an audit opinion. Do you know if we've done any work there to inform the previous members of Lichfield bid that that's been work's been completed, and or if not, is there any way we can make that audit opinion available to city centre businesses?
Yeah, I would, and I don't know, so I would have to take that away, Councillor Robertson, in relation to that, and come back to the committee on that.
Yeah, thank you. Again, yeah.
If I can, Chair, I mean, feel free to shut me up anytime you want. Page 78 now, so skipping down a few. We're into Appendix 1. I'm looking again, property leases and charges. There's high priority recommendations there that have been carried over basically as long as I've been on this council. And I know that we're awaiting progress update from management. That appears to have been awaiting progress update from management for many a moon now. So is there anything that we need to be doing as a committee to speed that up?
Not at the moment in relation to that, because currently we're doing a full review of property leases and charges, basically a re-review of that area currently. So once that review will look at those recommendations, ensure that they've been implemented, and then obviously there could possibly be new recommendations that are raised following the audit review. At the moment, we are in a position where it is one of those areas where we need to sort of carry that over in relation to getting the final comments from management in respect of that. But again, that was because of the length of time in relation to those high priority recommendations. That was one of the areas why it raised back into the audit plan and the audit programme for 23-24. So again, once we've got the finalised audit, then obviously again I will be able to bring that to the committee to provide you assurance that those recommendations have been implemented.
Thank you for that. And just to confirm, I'm hoping we can expect that in kind of Q1 this financial year. Yeah.
Okay, Dave. Thank you for the detailed explanation there. And I think your point, Dave, about does this committee need to get involved? I think we've offered that, and it has been accepted that if there are blockages in the way in any of the work to be done, then the committee can get involved. So again, I think we're on the same page on that. Is there, Andrew?
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate, Chair. I think that if I bring to this committee a similar report that I produced on the 21st of March for this committee around the length of time across all outstanding audit recommendations, that then will provide the committee with assurance that recommendations are being implemented, but also provide the information to the committee that if they feel that there are any significant areas that they wish managers to respond to, then those are highlighted, and that obviously then at subsequent committees, then management can come to address those concerns.
Thank you. Happy with that. Thank you. Okay, so on this particular agenda item 7, 2.1, we are to note the internal audit annual report, including results for the quarter to 31st of March 2024. Are we happy to say that we've noted that? Good. And commented. Thank you. Pardon me. Agenda item 8 is Andrew again to present on the risk management update. Andrew, please.
Thank you, Chair. Each quarter, I provide an update to the committee of the council's approach to risk management, and leadership team provide regular updates and comments to the council's strategic risk register, and these are being included in the attached appendices. Appendix 1 contains the council's strategic risk register and changes since the last review in February 2024, and are highlighted in yellow in the document. Additionally, a further strategic risk 8 is currently being considered for inclusion in the strategic risk register, and this relates to the council not having a local plan, and once agreed by leadership team will be included in the risk register moving forward, and is included for information as Appendix 2. The overall risk appetite of the council for strategic risks is maintained and has not changed since my last report in February 2024. Due to 3 strategic projects which are moving to the delivery stage, and given the risk they potentially present to the council, it is good practice to include these to have an oversight of the risk management approach. These are included as Appendix 3 and cover the cinema project, leisure centre project, and the redevelopment of the Birmingham Road site. These are contained within Appendix 3 as a report, and again have been reviewed by leadership team. Of the new strategic project risks, 1 is currently above the risk appetite of the council. Continued review of both strategic and strategic project risks will be maintained and also reported to this committee on a quarterly basis. I'm more than happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Tom, please.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chairman. Page 82, the threat to the council's ICT systems of a cyber attack. I think we're all sufficiently worldly wise, and we know enough people to know that this is an ever-present problem in this day and age with high-tech systems. And it seems as though there are people out there all around the world who are constantly devoting their time to fairly malevolent practices where they're trying to extort money from organizations, etc. So this, I think, is a growing problem, and I'm sure that we are fully aware of it. Can I ask that we are happy that our procedures for countering such a threat are constantly being reviewed and are updated with as much professional advice as we can muster? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Tom. Ian, are you okay to comment on that, please?
Yes, hi there. So yes, it is something we are ever mindful of, constantly vigilant to. We do as much as we can to reduce our attack surface. So, I mean, you made mention there of international. We actually do quite a lot to, reduce our attack surface, we call it, to just UK. So, and anybody attempting to get at us from outside the UK, we close them off before they even start. So, that's goes some way to mitigate the threat from state actors from overseas. Of course, they can still get themselves a presence within the UK to act from, but we see a certain amount of door rattling. So, I mean, that's one step that we take. We are also, as I say, ever reviewing what technologies we're using, our processes. We also run IT health checks, of which we've got one commissioned at the moment to be happening shortly, that will look at external threats. So it's what we call penetration testing. So we will use ethical hackers to attempt to access our systems, and whatever they find, we will then act on that. Similarly, we actually also give them a foothold within the organisation, a control foothold, for which they can also do the same sort of thing and subject us to some vulnerability testing. And again, we will react to any of those findings. We're also doing a lot of work at the moment to preempt and prepare ourselves for that activity. So it's things like that that we are doing to keep us out, try and keep ourselves ahead and responding to this. We also have a certain amount of monitoring in place so that certain activities we would get alerted to if we see unusual activity or systems going offline or down, etc. So which is part of just monitoring and maintaining our systems anyway. So yeah, there's a lot of things we're doing in that area.
Tom, do you want to come back?
If I may just come back and just say thank you very much for that answer, which is reassuring. I suppose if you cast your mind back 2 centuries, this would almost be the gamekeepers trying to keep control of the poachers. And it always worries me that the poachers are always that little bit cleverer and that little bit more determined than the gamekeepers. But we can only do as much as we can possibly manage. And I very much appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Sue, you were next, and then Paul, please.
Thanks, Chair. I very much welcome the inclusion of the lack of a current local plan in the register. And it's not just the lack of a local plan, but the knock-on effects of that, so it's, throughout the appendices, we see reference to the impacts of having no local plan. This is going to be a high-level risk for quite some time, because last night the Leader of Council told us it's likely to be around 3 years before there's a new local plan in place. So I just wanted to welcome the fact that we're keeping a very close eye on the impacts of having no local plan as at present. Thanks.
Thank you, Sue, for that. Paul.
Thank you. Just going back to the point that Tom raised, I think with the increased prevalence of potential state actors in cybersecurity issues, I was just wondering whether we as a council get any help from government in addressing those potentially more sophisticated attacks. I know over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been 3 or 4 councils pretty much brought to their knees by cyber attacks. And in one case, the cost of that was initially promised to be recouped or promised by government to be refunded and then wasn't. So I just wondered whether they took any proactive proactive action to help us.
Ian, would you like to respond to that, please?
Sure. So, yeah, we engage with the NCSC, National Cyber Security Centre, and we have subscribed to certain services that they provide that give us certain levels of monitoring. So, for instance, if any information relating to Lichfield District Council appears on areas that they are monitoring, dark web, etc., in fact, they would inform us of that. And that's part of the sort of services that are provided centrally that we can subscribe to. There's a number of other services that they have that we apply to our security layers. So try not to get too technical with this, but there are things like, so for instance, if people try to access links that are known to be malicious, malevolent, the addresses that are associated with them, they would get blocked. Okay, that's in addition to the blocking that we do through services we subscribe to. So, there are services like that that they provide. Anything of that nature they provide, we take up. When it comes to if there was a cyber event, we would engage with them also as part of our incident response program. And there are certain services and there's a certain level of support and assistance that they can provide to us in that. I mean, so it's all part of the layers and the sort of the tools that are in our armory there.
Paul, are you happy with that answer? Thank you. Dave?
Thank you, Chair. Just three on this, if I may. Page 87 in the strategic risk register, particularly in relation to the second line of assurance there. I know it says the response to learning from the recent incident at Ridware House. I'm presuming that was the one in November 2020. And I would hope that any learning that we could have gained from that we have done, and potentially the use of the word recent might be a bit of an outlier on that front. And then 2 bullet points down again, the approval of the climate change strategy, which I didn't think had been approved. And in fact I think was being redrafted and hasn't yet come back to the task group or over in scrutiny, certainly not to council. And then the final point is on page 93. The very top of it, it's kind of the hangover from page 92. The car parking strategy as a mitigating control within the viability of the city centre. My inbox and my reading of the feedback that residents put on local news sites and other internet websites, which may or may not be run by Mark Zuckerberg, are that strategy has been a very significant change. I actually think there's parts of it that are very good. There's parts of it I agree with less. But I'm not sure that that's currently operating as a mitigating control, and it may actually be operating as a driver of the kind of economic changes that we're seeking to mitigate against.
Thank you, Dave. Andrew, have you got any feedback
Yes,
on that?
I'll look at those and make the changes.
Thank you. Any other questions or queries on item 8, please? No? So number 2, recommendations that members note the risk management update and receive assurance on actions taking place to manage the council's most significant strategic and project risks. Are we all happy that we've made note of that? Yep, thank you very much. Agenda item 9 is going to be presented by Mark or Will, or both, on annual governance statement. So,
Thank you, Chair.
thank you, Mark.
Sorry, I apologise. I realise I'm conscious that I've ended up sitting behind everybody, but each year the council is required to prepare an annual governance statement, which forms part of the statement of accounts. The statement sets out the 7 principles of good governance as endorsed by SIPFA, and these are then further subdivided into supporting principles. The statement then sets out how these principles are embedded in the council's governance framework. So it's essentially a high-level overview and review document, and overall echoes previous external audit findings that there are no what are termed significant weaknesses in the council's governance arrangements. We have, however, highlighted a few matters. The audit finding delays, which looks like it may be being resolved. The management of conflicts of interest in respect of the LATCO, and the remedy of a GDPR issue in relation to WP Searchlight. So I'm very happy to receive members' views on the statement.
Thank you, Mark. Have we any questions on this item, please? John and then Sue, please.
The acronym is Objectives and Key Results, so it's a performance assessment.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to comment on page 117, the section on developing capacity. my concern for some time, and I've expressed it publicly and privately, is around capacity within the organisation while it goes through, you know, a huge change programme. And it's something I've actually discussed this afternoon with the Chief Executive and the Chief Operating Officer. I just think there are some caveats that we might want to add, or that Mark might want to add in that section around, you know, because it talks about developing capacity, and that's certainly got to be the case, but there are risks inherent in potential undercapacity at any one point. We all know that we've got far fewer employees to do pretty much the same jobs that were happening, you know, several years ago. I just wondered whether there might be some sort of acknowledgement that capacity needs to be developed, and there's a fear that undercapacity might cause difficulties for the whole organisation. I don't know how other members feel, but that was my sort of take from this particular section of the statement.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Mark, have you any feedback on that particular point at all about capacity?
I mean, we can certainly highlight, you know, the importance of ensuring that in an effective governance framework. So we can highlight that as something that needs to be kept under review.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, Anthony.
So I was just going to add to that. I don't want to undermine or counter what the Chief Executive, Chief Operating Officer, but, you know, I know one of the things that Simon's very passionate about is automation and robotics and things like that. So one of the means I suspect he would see as addressing capacity is to do the more routine tasks through an automated process, and then use bodies to do the value added, more judgmental type work. In that sense, that releases capacity from those more routine tasks to do the more change orientated, customer focused, place shaping type activities.
Thank you, Anthony.
If I can just come back on that, I think there are certainly issues about, you know, ways in which particularly managers and senior leadership team can devolve, you know, some of the sort of day-to-day activities and tasks to admin support or through automation. So, you know, if we can include some of that, there's an awareness, I know, and I know from the discussion this afternoon that there is a clear awareness of that, and that needs to be built in, because, you know, there are inherent risks in a sense in trying to build the better council 2021 to 2024 and beyond, and so some acknowledgement of that in terms of our governance, I think, would be helpful and make things more transparent.
Are you happy to do that, Mark, taking the flexibility that we've just been talking about on resource?
Indeed, if you're happy for me to agree some wording in consultation with the chair on that for inclusion, with the vice chair. Yeah.
You happy with that, sir? Yeah. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to kind of follow what Councillor Woodward said there, I think particularly within that, I think we need to recognise that because of the changes to being a better council, that some of the clerking responsibilities for council committees, not this one notably, now sit with the team that are also responsible for elections. We have elections 3 years out of 4, and it's just usually, so I mean, I know that the organisation swells to pretty much double its head count for that period, with poll clerks, etc. But I think for those key individuals, those few people who are running that governance team, I think potentially we would be very well. I'm really struggling to find my words. It'd be a really good idea to look at that, particularly in context of when things are going on around elections, because it is a very, very, very stressful period of time. I know I got in touch with Chris Lewis the other day about something, and I happened to be getting in touch on the date of close of nominations for Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner, which was like a whole thing. So there are some difficulties there, and it's not down to individuals, but I think making sure that we recognise that 3 years out of 4, we've got that massive pressure around, particularly end of March, April into May. and making sure that's fed into that process that council auditors were talking about.
Okay, Mark and Anthony, have you taken that point on board? Thank you, Dave, for that point. Any other comments at all from anyone? Nope. Okay. So we're on to the recommendations. This one is slightly different in that it is recommended that the audit committee review and approves the draft annual governance statement that will form part of the 2023-2024 statement of accounts as Appendix A. Are we happy that we fulfill that? We have reviewed it and approve it.
Chair, can I suggest subject to the amendments that Mark has agreed to take on board?
Okay, happy to do that, Mark. Yeah. Thank you, Sue. Number 2, it is recommended that the committee delegates authority to the chair of the committee and the governance manager to make further minor amendments to the annual governance statement prior to the inclusion of the final version in the statement of accounts. And to pick up on your point, Sue, it would be chair and vice chair. Point noted. Thank you. Are we happy on point 2 to accept that? Thank you. And point 3 of that section, it is recommended that the local code of corporate governance for 2024-25 be approved as per Appendix B. Okay, show of hands, everybody's happy. Thank you. We have achieved item 9. Item 10, data protection policy and UK GDPR update by Ian Edwards, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is quite a simple little report there in response to some a question from the previous audit committee and around the training that we've provided to staff and also councillors, in fact. And so just to outline the completion rates on the both the GDPR and the cybersecurity training that we provide. That training's e-based, so we provide it through our online learning platform. We have, through the mechanisms that training has in it, to encourage people to do their training, so before we even sort of start chasing people and making threats about taking their access away and such like. We've achieved across the staff a rate of in excess of 90% across both of those. So I think we're getting a pretty good hit rate on the training there. We've also then supplementing that with an action plan that we've got there on the second page of this report. So through all hands call with all staff last week, they were all encouraged to look at their training and make sure they're all up to date on it. Managers have been reminded of the dashboard that they have access to, that they can view where their staff are at, and we will be taking, at the end of the month, a list of anybody who is still to do their training to leadership, with the final threat of removing access should people not complete the training. This was a threat that we actually did use last year, and we brought everybody up to standard through doing so. There was a fair bit of chasing involved on a few people, but we got there. So yeah, the mechanisms I think that we've got in place there are working. I will note, councillors are on here, but it isn't mandatory for councillors. It is an optional training there. So but I would encourage you to share with your colleagues that the training is available and to take a look at it. I'm happy to take any questions on this.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Paul, you have a question, please?
Yeah, just a picky one. I'm sure top right of the table, I'm sure that means certified cyber percentage rather than not.
Thank you, Paul. I think in any organisation I've ever been involved with, getting staff to achieve their training plans, particularly with something like this, is always a difficult task. So good luck on that one. And I certainly think that the action plan that you've put together on the back there, item 4, will go a long way to do that, Ian. Well, it is right. And when I saw it optional for councillors, I did think that maybe we should consider being non-optional for councillors, because we're an important part of the information process. I don't know what this committee feels about that.
Yes, if I can comment, Chair, because as the leader of the Labour group, I'm theoretically responsible for ensuring that Labour members complete this training. But of course, it is optional. You know, you can't. There are no mechanisms whereby you can make an elected member do this particular training. But something slightly more robust than optional might be helpful. I can't say any more than that, really.
Okay, maybe that's something that yourself and Doug can have a word with, and all the other leaders as well. Paul, and then Dave.
Yeah, as a member who's reminded every time we discuss this that I had to abandon the GDPR training halfway through and have never quite got round to restarting it. Something that would focus my mind occasionally would not go amiss.
I think that person is sitting next to you. Dave.
Yeah, I think I've admitted this before, but I tried 3 times because the first time I tried it, it didn't record somehow. I'd done something wrong. And then it took me another couple of attempts. But if you persevere, you know, you get the tick in the box at the end.
Thanks, Sue. Dave, please.
So at the risk of incurring the wrath of Councillor Woodward, I will actually admit I'm one of those who hasn't yet done this. One thing I will say is I do have to certify annually in work because of the nature of the data that we handle having the additional protections because of its political sensitivity. So I do that, and I've never quite got round to transferring that over some certified here, and I'm aware that's something I need to find time for. But actually, in terms of us as an organisation, we're aware actually here that we've got 34 users who haven't. We've got no way of assuring that they are acting in a GDPR compliant way. There's not a huge amount we can do in terms of forcing them to do so. Is there anything that we're able to build in to the IT systems behind a member's email address? I'm aware most of the cyber attacks that are successful are picnic problems as opposed to system problems, and quite often it's somebody clicking a link. And I'm just wondering if, I know we've got the Protect EU Mimecast, so that when you click a link, it goes via that. Are we comfortable that that's sufficient to deal with anything that members may be receiving, or is there additional layers of security that we need to put in there between, particularly that councillor email address, given the data that's here and the systems which are critical?
Ian.
Yeah. So there are some things that we already do with members. So, and we do it with members and also at leadership, because you are public figures and your names are out there. Your email addresses are published. Therefore, it's quite easy to collect a list of your email addresses and then use those to try and do things. Your questions are pertinent ones, and it's got me thinking. There are a couple of other things we can do around the councillors, perhaps to do some reporting on access or attempted access to accounts. There are some, and there is also something that we have in place already around the phishing. So you are potentially targets for what is known as whaling, big fish. I know whales aren't a fish, but there we go. Okay, but and it's the practice of basically attempting to impersonate you with either members of staff here or with each other. I think you would have seen, some of you may have seen the things that went on in the past with the Apple vouchers attempts, where someone was going, can you do me a favor? Can you get me some Apple vouchers and I'll sort it out with you later? And yeah, we managed to put a stop to those by applying this these techniques called impersonation protection. Okay, so we do see some of that happen and go on. We don't report it to you necessarily. You know, it's part of the background noise of this, but but yeah, certainly we have some of that. I think we can there's some other things we can do about access. I'll have a look and I'll have a talk to the team and feedback on on some reporting around access attempts to council accounts specifically.
Thank you, Ian. Tom, you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I hope it's not sort of non sequitur, really. I don't think it is. I'm just thinking that in terms of the training, and I'm sure the training is constantly being rated and made more relevant to the current situation. I haven't heard the term AI mentioned yet this evening. Now, AI, I do know, is a rising threat. Impersonation, you can actually make people say something on video which they've never said. Could the training incorporate perhaps a basic awareness of AI and what it can do, and the dangers of it as well? We had a talk, a seminar where I work, and it was really quite, it wasn't just intriguing, it was quite concerning about the powers that AI can exert now. And I would say that without trying to cast aspersions on anybody, that the vast majority of the general public, and that probably includes us as well, are blissfully unaware of the powers that now are around us, again, from malevolent bodies. And I think AI is something which we need to create a much greater awareness of. And if it could be incorporated into the training in some way, I think that would be very useful. Thank you.
Does everyone agree with Tom that that's a valid point to raise? It seems a general yes. Ian, can you respond, please?
Yes, happy to respond. So yes, AI, it is emerging. It's emerging both as a threat and also as a tool. A force for good as well as for evil, let's say. But I think one of the things that we potentially need to do is look at policy or guidelines around AI, both for our use of it, but also as, to fit with that, some education as to what it's capable of in both respects. I can certainly take away and have a look at what we may include. Obviously, the training that's going on in the moment, it won't include it, but as you note, we do update and add to that. So it is one of those things, as it's emerging, we could probably find some material to add to it to give people some awareness there for future iterations of that training.
Chairman, if I just may say thank you very much for the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, no more questions on this. We'll go to the recommendation, please, which is to proceed with the action plan in section 4 to raise the completion rates of the training. Item 4 lists 4 actions. Are we happy that that action plan is sufficient? Yep. Thank you very much. And last but not least, having to sit here waiting patiently. So this section is a progress report from Assets, our external auditors. So over to you, please, Laura and Cameron.
Thanks, Chair. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to introduce members to Cameron, who is the Assistant Manager working for Lichfield District Council. This is the first time he's attended Audit Committee. The purpose of our report is to give an update on the progress to the 23-24 financial statements audit. And I think overall, I would say that the progress that's been made has been really positive, especially given the delays that have been experienced from an audit perspective over the last couple of years. You'll see from the report that I think in total there's about 17 items that we are commenting on that we've made good progress against. But the 5 of them that I'm sure people will be most interested in are those that are amber on the report. So there are 5 at the moment which are either, I would say, experiencing delays or experiencing a few minor niggles that we're trying to work through. But it is important that we just draw attention to the fact that these 5 points, most of them are out of the control of the direct finance team. So I am satisfied that we are getting good information from the finance team and timely information. The first two that I'll draw your attention to are the review of the predecessor audit work and the review of the opening balances at the 1st of April 23. Obviously, those financial statements haven't been signed as yet, although I understand in the next couple of weeks that should be the case. So we'll start to undertake that work. So even though it's listed as amber, we have done as much as we can do at this point in time. The other 3 items are IT general controls. So we have a responsibility to understand your IT system, and it's something that we experience quite often in terms of our IT team talking to your IT team, and getting the right information can take a period of time. So that work is now in progress, and the scope of that work has now been agreed, but did experience a slight delay, hence why it's listed as amber. Again, another point that we draw attention to is to try and mitigate against any delays that we could experience in the summer. We are trying to get a full download from your system to put it into our kind of audit software, just to make sure that we're not going to come across problems in July. We are experiencing a couple of challenges in terms of getting that information in the right way, but that again is something that's very much our end. That's a delay that we're experiencing, but working through in the next couple of weeks. And the final point is just around management's expert. This is in terms of the valuation of other land and buildings. We have written to the valuer to try and gain assurance over their competence, capability and objectivity. And we haven't yet received a response from the valuer, but we do know that that work is in progress, and we are expecting a response as well as the valuation report in the next couple of weeks as well. I don't propose to draw attention to anything else within the report, but I'm happy to take questions on anything in there.
Thank you, Laura. Can I ask the first question? The meeting on the 9th of April, item 3, IT general controls, did that happen then?
I would assume that that did happen.
Sorry, maybe I should have asked Ian. I'm sorry, Laura. But Ian has confirmed it has. Thank you. Are there any other questions of Laura or Cameron, please?
Chair, if I can just make a comment, I'm grateful that Laura and Cameron have lasted throughout the whole of this audit committee meeting, but this is really quite reassuring that those 5 risks there out of 17 are amber, and there are explanations as to why they're not yet green. So hopefully we'll see them as green in the near future, but thank you very much for this. It is reassuring.
Thank you, Sue. And I'd agree with that. And the way that this is presented in a very clear way, it makes it very easy for us to follow what's going on. So thank you for that, and well done to all concerned. Okay, item number 12 is the work programme, which has come to an end for this particular period. So the question from me will be, when will the new work programme be available?
Thank you very much, Chair. So basically, as soon as this committee has ended, in the coming days, I'll be contacting the officers that are regularly involved in this committee with a proposed work programme that we can then work through to hopefully balance out the reports across the meeting dates so that they're not all loaded into one particular meeting. So there's a manageable amount of discussions at each meeting for members. So I would estimate hopefully to have that to yourself as Vice Chair and Councillor Howe as Chair, certainly before the next meeting. I would say within the next month or so. I would be more confident if it wasn't for the local elections coming up. I'm just working out whether I'm doing it before that or after that, but certainly within the next month, I can assure you.
Thank you, Will. Any points on the work programme at all? No, thank you. Item number 13 is exclusion of the press and the public, and I therefore have to read this statement. It is resolved that as publicity would be prejudicial to the public interest by reason of the confidential nature of the business to be transacted, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, which would involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 in private.